why leaders don't like to talk about truth and reconciliation. How can we do more? As individuals, we can each do our part in advancing truth and reconciliation. But to make big changes that affect large groups of people requires leaders from government, corporations, and large organizations to make changes in spaces where they have authority and ability to prioritize Indigenous truth and reconciliation. But why is this not happening? Why does it seem like many large organizations are not making any effort toward truth and reconciliation? Over the past few years, working with many large organizational leaders in the space of Indigenous reconciliation, the frustrations and comments are always the same. Many people genuinely want to make a difference and do good, but they feel stuck and can't move past it. If you're someone who's been frustrated by organizations you're a part of, working with, or working for, and you feel like leaders aren't doing anything to support the advancement of Indigenous truth and reconciliation, I want to shine some light on what exactly I have seen working with some of the country's largest companies on how to advance their Indigenous reconciliation efforts. Before this episode starts, I have a small favor to ask from you. 89% of people who watch this channel don't subscribe. So if you've ever liked any of the videos we've posted, if you like this channel, can you please do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button? It helps the channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the better we can together make an impact towards Indigenous truth and reconciliation. Thank you and enjoy this episode. By far, the biggest issue I've seen is in communicating and in talking about Indigenous subject matter. Similar to any other behavior change, action taking, or project, you can't actually do anything if you can't talk about it, right? And that's what I see is why a majority of the leaders and decision makers are stuck not taking action. Why leaders don't talk about Indigenous truth and reconciliation. Now, the first reason I've seen organizational leaders not talking about truth and reconciliation is the fear of facing the consequences of their actions. Now, why do they fear facing the consequences of their actions about truth and reconciliation? Well, the feelings about truth and reconciliation are incredibly intense, right? The thoughts as well about reconciliation are drastically different across a community, a group of people, or across an organization. And as a result of these feelings about truth and reconciliation and perspectives being really broad and different, it makes the stakes in communicating or acting on Indigenous matters, in Canada at least, so incredibly high for companies and brands. And it creates a lot of analysis, careful calculation of what risks that they can mitigate. And this is often done by people that are using a Western worldview, a transactionary or binary thinking as a result. Now, what this looks like is fear of admitting wrongdoing on behalf of their organization, or fear of sparking controversy or conflict among important stakeholders. Now, how can these leaders begin to overcome this? First, accept the fears are being valid and that they are real. Now, what's the worst that can happen, right? And then have a plan to deal with that if it occurs. Now, the second reason that I've seen organizational leaders not talking about truth and reconciliation is they genuinely feel embarrassed and shameful for not having taken sufficient action on the issue earlier. Now, why do leaders feel embarrassed and shame for not having taken sufficient action? Well, they're usually progressive companies in their Indigenous reconciliation work. They know because they have internal experiences around what this looks like. And what this looks like is if they've done a lot of great work, but maybe they don't communicate it externally. Maybe they've already been working with Indigenous relations, people with Indigenous communities in-house, and unfortunately, that can create gatekeeping and shame. Now, how can leaders overcome feeling shame for not having taken sufficient action on the issue earlier? First, ask where the shame is coming from. What is the source? And then get aligned on the core issue that might be causing hesitancy. Is there internal culture issues? Is there a process issue maybe where there needs to be too many approvals? Then you can know how to move forward. And keep in mind that there's no perfect formula. The work you're doing and stories you're sharing will inspire someone and could change their life. The third reason I've seen organizational leaders not talking about truth and reconciliation, they don't want open dialogue on difficult topics. Now, why do they not want open dialogue on difficult topics? Well, it causes a stir if it's controversial. Maybe they see it as being distracting from other things going on in their company, or they're insecure of losing control. Essentially, it's a colonial mindset. Hate to say it, but it's true. This might look like not understanding the complexity or scope of Indigenous truth and reconciliation. It creates something to talk about, right? And the lack of understanding about how to navigate these difficult conversations and lack of knowledge about how to address this issue in a respectful way. How do you overcome this as leaders not wanting open dialogue on difficult topics? The first thing you can do is gain permission, right? And then create a safe space within rules, parameters, and disclaimers that you can feel confident moving forward with. I'd love to know if any of these reasons why leaders don't talk about Indigenous truth and reconciliation resonate with you, if they stand out to you. Please let me know in the comments below. Now, the fourth reason I've seen organizational leaders not talking about truth and reconciliation is they aren't certain if there's enough political will in their organization for truth and reconciliation efforts. Now, why do they feel this way? Well, large bureaucratic organizations usually require a lot of people to approve decision-making. When these changes require a lot of buy-in on such a sensitive topic, not to mention, these feelings are personally driven. So it's very difficult to know if higher-up leaders will buy into it, right? Many organizations that have been around for a while have a role, and a big role, to play in the history of oppressing Indigenous people and communities. Engaging in truth and reconciliation would mean that they would naturally have to make drastic changes to policies or processes that would require significant time and money. Now, what does uncertainty if there's going to be enough political will for truth and reconciliation efforts look like? Asking yourself, are other leaders going to be on board with these efforts and these initiatives and expensive changes potentially? They might not. And thinking, I don't want to take the risk of bringing this forward to superiors in case they don't agree with me. I could lose my job, right? Serious risks. Now, how do you overcome this uncertainty if there's not enough political will in your organization for these efforts? Unfortunately, sometimes this means accepting that it's going to take new leadership, and that will mean making serious changes, and it might take a lot of time as well. Now on to the fifth reason that I've seen organizational leaders not talking about truth and reconciliation is that they don't want to damage their brand reputation. Why are leaders worried that talking about truth and reconciliation would damage their brand reputation? If they don't have any cultural understanding in what they're talking about, or if their organization or industry has played a major role in contributing to Indigenous oppression or history, that could be some reasons. Now, not wanting to damage their brand reputation could look like worrying about relationships with clients or important partners, concern for what publicly acknowledging trauma may negatively affect their reputation of their organization, right? How can you overcome being afraid of truth and reconciliation damaging your brand reputation? The first step is to understand that not acknowledging truth and reconciliation is worse than doing it imperfectly, right? There is no perfect action. There is no perfect way to talk about this kind of subject matter and this type of content. The second step you want to take is taking the humble steps of learning and starting by active listening to potentially other important stakeholders in your industry, in your environment, or other colleagues that may have experiences that are relevant to truth and reconciliation that can help you get that important learning, that important education of what steps you can make and how you can make a difference. The third step is to then get aligned with other organizational leaders on your internal team to make sure that you are all educated on what learnings are taking place and making sure that you are aligned in the actions that you're going to take next. I hope that you've found this video helpful in understanding why leaders of major organizations that are impacting our lives sometimes don't feel comfortable talking about Indigenous truth and reconciliation, and how we as individuals, whatever role that we play in different organizations that we are a part of, how we can take an active role to supporting ourselves, our colleagues, our team members, our family members, to be empowered, to feel empowered to speak up, and to start learning so that we can together make an impact towards truth and reconciliation. Chimigwech, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts and feedback in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.